Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Bicycle Touring Talk. My name is George Schlackegg.
The one and only.
No worries if you can't say that. I'm having trouble myself. In this series, I'm telling you about a bicycle tour I did a few years ago across Central America. I have lots of pictures to share and illustrate the situations the way I remember them, hoping you can relive it with me. In episode 43, I told you about how I had reached Chisec, Guatemala, and was now planning to reach the city of Coban in a day. Coban is the center of Guatemala's coffee growing region, and its elevation is over 1,300 meters. This meant over 1,000 meters of climbing. No small feat with a fully loaded touring bike. The distance was just over 75 kilometers, which would have been quite a trip even without the elevation gain. Needless to say that it was a long day and a lot of struggling up steep climbs. Some hills were too steep to ride up. Pushing wasn't that much better. I really had to lean into the hill to control it and always keep a hand ready to pull the brake. See, it is impossible to say how much climbing this trip really has. You have to keep in mind that you never just go up. The road constantly changes. There are sections where you're climbing very steep hills only to turn a curve and then it goes back down for a while. It was on one of those downhill parts where I lost my cap. It blew right off my head due to insane speed. There was no way I was going to turn around to pick it up because that would have meant climbing an incredibly steep section. I still had one other cap. Yes, I have to admit here that I did the entire tour without a helmet.
Oh no!
The idea had been to go shopping for one in Mexico. Now call me stubborn, but the only helmets available in Cancun had been way overpriced, and so I had started the tour without one. Once I reached Coban, there was no question. I needed an extra day here. Number one, to explore this interesting city, and secondly, to rest my body. I'm not sure what I was thinking because each should have happened on separate days. My day in Coban wasn't truly a rest day at all. I walked all over the city, took pictures, and simply couldn't get enough of the sights. This place was so busy and really beautiful. Some of the coffee shops actually had German names because early in the 20th century, Germans had established coffee plantations in the area. I found Malfetzer Cafe and sure would have liked to buy some coffee to bring home. But the last thing I wanted was more weight on the bike, so I passed. I also visited a mall, had my laundry done, and bought a new cap at the market. Probably a knockoff Quicksilver branded cap, which later became my favorite. I still have it today. It was definitely worth spending an extra day. For the first time since the beginning of the trip, I had a full supply of clean clothes. The plan was to ride to Salama the next day. Some said it was only 50 kilometers. But looking at my map and Google Maps, each gave me different information, so I couldn't be sure. I was going to leave Coban on January 31st, but then it rained all morning. At one point, I was ready to extend my stay in Coban by an extra day. However, when I checked the forecast, it seemed favorable. Eventually, the rain seemed to taper off and I hit the road. Of course, as soon as I was on the highway with my loaded bike, it started pouring buckets. I was screwed. It wasn't really warm anymore, but fog was rising from the wet pavement, making it just about the worst riding weather I've had on this entire tour. The roads in Guatemala are generally good. This highway had been freshly paved not long ago, but there was a 6-inch drop-off between the travel lanes and the shoulder, which tended to disappear in every curve, making it necessary to get over that hump frequently. I was used to it already on dry pavement, but with the road wet and slippery, it became a whole new challenge that I clearly underestimated. At one point, I slid and lost control of the bike, which caused me to crash instantly. I was very lucky because there was no car traffic at that point. I can't honestly say that I didn't get hurt. My ribcage felt like something was definitely wrong, and my left big toe was scraped pretty bad. But what was I to do? I stood in the rain for a couple of minutes, checking my bike and moving my aching body to make sure everything was functional. Ouch, that really hurt. But I was up on the bike rather quickly, continuing the ride in the rain. I ended the day early in a small town by the name of Purulha, where I first had lunch and then found a nice hotel that called itself El Descanso de San Antonio, for a very good price. El Descanso means rest, just what I needed, along with some band-aids for my aching toe. Of course, I regretted having worn open-toed sandals. I've been riding in sandals that cover the toes ever since that incident. The rain stopped later that afternoon, but there were dark clouds and showers returned in the evening. I continued on early again the next morning in fog and drizzle. It was kind of a drag, but what else could I do? There didn't seem to be much point waiting for better weather. The real problem was the altitude. Mountain weather can change very quickly and is unpredictable. As soon as it got a little better and I started to dry off, another problem popped up. A flat front tire. I first patched it myself, but must have missed something when inspecting my tire, because only a few kilometers down the road, it went flat again, right in front of a little tire shop. When the guys at the shop saw me push the bike, they asked if they could fix the tire for me. It was a no-brainer because they didn't ask a lot of money. They also checked my tire very carefully and pulled out a tiny piece of wire. Once it was all fixed, I had a good conversation with the guys at the shop and found out that the road was going to be all downhill from this point on until I'd reach a place they called El Rancho, about 40 kilometers away. There were lots of inexpensive places to stay, they told me. From that moment on, El Rancho became my destination for the day. The 40 kilometers felt like nothing at all. Finally, I was riding on a dry road again. The sun was shining and I was going crazy fast with minimal effort. Altitude is like money in the bank. You first have to work for it, but at some point you get to spend it, which means an easy ride. I stopped for a late lunch at a huge highway travel center with a Shell gas station that reminded me of truck stops in the US. From that point on, the descent was a bit slower, but still a breeze. El Rancho was a crazy busy place, probably due to its location at a major highway intersection. I found a cheap hotel pretty easily and took the room for one night. There was a kind of market in walking distance of the hotel, right along the highway, and that was where I went for supper. The mother and daughter team were running a small food stand here and served a great dinner. There were other guests who all seemed to be truckers. Later, I was walking around the market and scoping out the area till after dark. It was quiet at my hotel and I fell asleep quickly. February 2nd started with a surprise. I woke up from what sounded like machine gun fire right outside my hotel. Yeah, it freaked me out. Guatemala was indeed a bit like the Wild West. I sure didn't want to get hit by a stray bullet or whatever else was going on outside, so I stayed put for a while, trying to figure out what else might be going on outside. Some women were apparently freaking out too, as I heard them yelling. In the end, it was revealed that it was some niños, kids. What the hell were they doing? The sound could have been some kind of fireworks too, and that's what it eventually turned out to be. After I got up, I discovered ants in my bathroom. They all crawled up to the sink, apparently looking for water from the dripping faucet. Good thing they hadn't discovered my panniers with all the snacks inside. At checkout, I asked the hotel owner about the noise I had heard. He just grinned like he knew exactly what I was talking about, but pretended like he didn't. Fireworks. Yeah, right. I stopped at the market again for a quick breakfast. Jalapa, a small city, was gonna be my destination for the day. Part of the ride was via the Pan-American highway that led to Guatemala, the capital city, but I wasn't planning on going there. Instead, I'd be turning off at Sanarate. As soon as I left El Rancho, there was another big surprise.
The Caravana del Zorro.
A motorcycle festival of sort. It was an endless flood of motorcycles in the oncoming lane. Many of the riders were wearing masks and taking unnecessary risks. Entire families could be observed riding on a single bike. I counted up to 5. 2 of them young kids, too small to know any better. The riders took up both travel lanes, except whenever a truck was trying to get through from my direction. The ride was extremely stressful and seemed dangerous. Sanarate could not come soon enough. According to the map, it had to be at around kilometer 85, so I found myself constantly looking for markers. At times, the traffic got so heavy that I had no space on the road at all and had to use the very rough, unpaved shoulder. Sanarate was a left turn, but it was also a stopping point for the bikers, and to my surprise, I made the turn easily. Once I was off the highway, my surroundings were drastically different, but still quite challenging. The main road was narrow and led through the center of town, which was busy with traffic. There wasn't much of a sidewalk to speak of, and it was filled with people. I was due for lunch, so started looking for a place to eat. That was when I spotted a small chicken place named Mi Pollo. There was just enough space to lean my bike. A friendly lady seemed to run the place by herself, so I ordered a portion of chicken with all the fixings. It was probably the best fried chicken I've had in my entire life. The lady who had cooked and sold it to me introduced herself as Ceci. She was very friendly and curious about what had brought me to Sanarate. We had a lively conversation, and it was like time had stopped. Ceci even shared the snack she had brought from home for herself with me, telling me that dessert was also included. We exchanged contact information, and Ceci remains a friend to this day, 8 years later. Sometimes it doesn't take long to make a lasting connection. Finally, I went on to tackle the hills of Route 19, the road to Jalapa. Sure, I was used to climbing by now, but it was still very challenging. What was nice was that there was hardly any traffic to speak of. The Caravana del Zorro was far behind me now. The new challenge was intense sunshine, sharp curves, and steep inclines. The reward were amazing outlooks. The only spoiler was that there were rogue garbage dumps along the road here and there. Unfortunately, this is typical for Central America. It seems that the garbage just burns off from time to time, which sure isn't helping the environment neither. The last 15 kilometers I was accompanied by a local bicycle enthusiast and former competitive cyclist. Eduardo was riding a classic road bike on what seemed to be his regular training ride. He didn't seem to mind slowing down his pace a bit so we could ride together. It sure helped me forget about my aching legs. According to Eduardo, I was pretty close to El Salvador and could probably make it across the border the next day. However, I had other plans. Instead of rushing toward the border, I was going to cycle the 55 kilometers to Jutiapa the following day and take a day off there, which was going to be a Monday. Sunday seemed like a perfect day for a quiet ride because all the bad drivers were probably going to spend their day in church and with family. Eduardo hooked me up with a friend who had a hotel in town and gave me a sweet deal on a room that was definitely a step up from the ones I've been sleeping in for a while. There was a shower with warm water, and even the internet worked without glitches. After my typical walk around town, checking out the surroundings and eating dinner, I spent considerable time researching El Salvador. I also happened to come across the crime statistics for Guatemala for the month of January. There had been 485 murders in the country that month. 36% of them had taken place in Guatemala City, the capital. It reminded me of the people in Belize who had warned me about cycling in Guatemala. As a cyclist, I had not witnessed anything bad except perhaps for some firecracker noise in El Rancho. Well, the Caravana del Zorro wasn't crime related, but definitely not exactly the safest environment. February 3rd was a beautiful day, and the ride was relatively easy. The road from Jalapa to El Progreso was supposed to be gravel according to Google Maps. To my pleasant surprise, it was freshly paved and a pleasure to ride on. The wind was also kind to me that day. The last section from El Progreso to Jutiapa is also a section of the Pan American Highway. Once again, I saw a lot of bikers here who appeared to be on their way home from the Caravana del Zorro. I observed many of them stopping at roadside restaurants for a couple of beers. It reminded me that yes, indeed, cycling in Guatemala wasn't exactly the safest thing I'd ever done. However, with a little more caution than usual, the journey had turned out great, except for a scraped big toe and a mildly bruised ribcage, which were all on the mend. I really needed a rest day though, and so it was a blessing when I found a pretty nice budget hotel right in the center of Jutiapa. I took the room for 2 nights. It felt like a big relief to have a place for some real rest, even just for 1 extra day. Again, I had pretty decent internet and even found a message from Jan, the cyclist I had met in Belize. He was in Guatemala City, and his Facebook posts showed some pretty challenging terrain with washed out roads. He was planning to cross into El Salvador as well in the coming days. Perhaps we'd meet again on our journey south. I'll tell you how it all went in my next video. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider it so you won't miss my next episode. There's of course no commitment, but it helps you find my next video and it means a lot to my channel. All the best to you, and hey, I've got some videos popping up on the screen you might enjoy. See you soon!